Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or morning, afternoon, whatever the case may be as you tune in and join us today. Welcome back to the Overanalysts podcast, bringing you serious and silly discussions surrounding gaming as both an industry and a culture for just around a year now. Today is something of a special event for us here at the show, as we have been taking some time, hence the effective week off we took, to mainline From Software's blockbuster hit Elden Ring so that we, along with members of our moderation team and streaming community, could provide a tentative review for you. So today's episode is going to be just that. A handful of Overanalysts crew members getting together and discussing our experiences with the game. And one thing I'm very pleased to report before we go in is that our experiences vary significantly between the four playthroughs you're going to hear about. And so you're going to receive a wide variety of disparate, but I think equally well-founded perspectives on the game and kind of how From Software and their formula have grown over time. That said, welcome to the show. My name is Brady, or the Overanalyst, on Twitch and associated platforms, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Mate, or Comrade Potato.
Hey.
And we are joined today by two members of our moderation team, one of whom is a fellow streamer who does absolutely phenomenal Soulsborne challenge runs. Eclipsesight is in the building.
Hello. How are y'all doing?
And ExitDust is joining us, another fantastic member of our mod community.
Hello.
First of all, Eclipse and Exit both, thank you guys so much for joining us today and being willing to share your thoughts. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
Yep, no worries. As Edit said in chat, possible spoilers, or no, not possible,
Yes.
Definite spoilers.
I was going to do just that. Thank you for bringing it to mind, Eclipse. So, to all of our listeners out there, before we begin, this episode will contain throughout, I'm afraid I can't provide timestamps or anything like that due to the way the discussion is going to be structured, but this episode is going to provide pretty extensive spoilers about the way Elden Ring is presented to the player and the way it actually plays. That's going to include information pertaining to the game's super bosses. It's going to include information pertaining to builds. It's going to include information pertaining to the central, maybe not the plot line directly, but I will be discussing characters a fair little bit. So, if you want to experience the game completely blind, well, odds are you probably already have, but if you haven't, I highly suggest you either skip ahead to the tail end of the episode to receive our final thoughts in a more general format, or wait until you have satiated your own curiosity in a way you're comfortable with, and can then return to the episode to hear our thoughts as we break them down for you. Thank you. This has been your spoiler warning. So, just to begin, let's see where everyone's at with their Elden Ring playthroughs and their journey. For instance, I got the game in the afternoon on launch day, and I beat it 2 days ago, or to be specific, in the early hours of yesterday. Completed one playthrough, did almost everything you can do in one playthrough, and I think I've got a pretty concrete picture of how the game looks for me. What about you guys?
Who do you want to start with?
You can.
All right. So I got 86 hours in the game at the moment. I've not beelined it because I did take my time to run around and try to discover the various things that you can side quest and get distracted with. I haven't finished my playthrough. I'm at the last boss. But yeah, I do have 86 hours in it, and I'm absolutely loving it.
Right on.
What about you, Potato?
I got 84, 85 hours. And yeah, I'm enjoying myself. I haven't gotten to the last boss yet. I've just I think the last story one I killed was the fire giant. But I'm still like I'm doing a little bit of progression, a little bit of exploring, just combining the two to make it more enjoyable for myself. And honestly, that's like the most optimal way I found to. I like to play it.
And Eclipse?
Okay. Yeah. First of all, hold on. Is there a reason that my line isn't moving?
That could just be a visual glitch because we hear you and it is recording.
Okay, fair enough.
Certain of them just look, usually I've noticed, not always, the audio waveforms for participants other than the host tend to be smaller for whatever reason. Not always.
And Seth fixes it in post anyway, so.
Okay, fair enough. I am nowhere near as far as you guys. I've done about 40 hours, I think, and a bunch of that was like troubleshooting my PC, having problems with this game. And honestly, a lot of it was just running around trying to explore.
Yeah. Well, right on.
Or being stubborn and throw myself at bosses. I shouldn't be throwing myself out yet.
Stubbornness is also a trait that informed a lot of my playthrough. But I'm glad we have this variety of experience from the outset, because I think, as our listeners are probably going to see throughout this conversation, they're going to get two relatively glowing perspectives on the game and two relatively critical ones. But I think we're all unified in saying, collectively, right, taken all together, it's a very impressive product.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what they've done on a technical level is super impressive. So what I'd like to do, with your approval, is break the game down kind of element by element. And I think I have this outlined. I want to start where, based on all of our conversations, our opinions seem to concur most strongly, and gradually move to those topics or those facets of the game where divergence in our perspectives is evident, so that the audience can kind of see, the overall package of the game and then different perspectives on it as we move on. Don't you think that's a decent idea for layout here?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that works. I think it started off soft and then we kill each other at the end.
So, in the event that you aren't aware, Elden Ring is, like, just to level with you, it's essentially the next Dark Souls title, mechanically, but with a number of quality of life improvements that aid exploration, that aid mobility outside of combat. Just a lot of things outside of combat have been made a lot smoother, and FromSoft has, of course, created a new universe, a sprawling open world experience with a rich backstory and kind of worldcraft informed by George R.R. Martin, who provided a foundational lore Bible for this setting that From Software president and game director Hidetaka Miyazaki altered significantly, but still used as the foundation for his world. So as a result, the world feels and the lore feels very different from FromSoft's usual, very bleak, but also very rote, like standard Western medieval fantasy tropes. Elden Ring's world is infinitely more colorful, more upbeat, more kind of fantastical, a more fantastical fantasy, if that makes sense. And you can tell that a different hand was involved in the creation of this setting. But I think where we can all agree is the world building, so the construction of lore, the way characters are written, quest lines are written, and player interactions are kind of designed, and then the aesthetics, the way the game actually looks, are probably like the best that this franchise has delivered since its inception. I think we can probably all agree there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Like, the game is... This is why I almost wish we could release this in a video form. The game is so colorful. And without going into too much spoiler territory too early on, The game is set in a world divided up into several different countries, each with their own distinct history and theming and factions and what have you. And each of these countries has a totally different visual design, with the exception of one that in lore is meant to be a really cheap imitation of another, which is brilliant. In terms of how it looks, in terms of how it sounds, like the soundtrack, I think this is the best FromSoft's ever done. It's really impressive. It's really vibrant and colorful while still being dangerous and daunting. It's really well made as an audio-visual experience. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
The basic premise of most of the Souls games that I've played is that whatever you can see in the game, you can go there.
Mm-hmm.
And that is definitely true in Elden Ring,
Mm-hmm.
where you can actually see a lot. And if you stand up high on a mountain or on a building, and you can peer into the distance, you can see stuff that's in other realms that you have no access to at that point in time. But you will know that you will and can get there. And that was something that really amazed me, that they built it to such of a scale that you will be able to tell that's the snowy mountains of another realm that I can go to later in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that really struck me as surprising, seeing the size of what we're dealing with here.
And those secrets or those treasures you can find by just traveling to interesting looking spots in the distance are hardly ever insubstantial, like, oh, you just get some crafting items or some consumables. Oftentimes there's full-on optional dungeons or bosses or things like that over that next ridge. So I think the idea of see it, go there is more compelling here than it has been in the more linear Souls titles, for sure. Reminded me very much of my experience with Breath of the Wild in that regard.
I think we're going to get a lot of Breath of the Wild comparisons in this
yes,
particular podcast. Maybe even Assassin's Creed as well. Somebody told me that this was the best Assassin's Creed game that they ever played, which made me chuckle.
I can see it
because it is an open world. It plays a little bit like, oh yeah, you have to run around and discover all that stuff. And playing this game more and more, I did get this Assassin's Creed Odyssey feeling of, oh yeah, let's see what this part of the map has to offer, and see what happens here, what kind of stories we can make here. And I did see it. So yeah, Breath of the Wild, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I think we're gonna hear a lot of comparisons in this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Oh, something important to point out, I should say, that honestly pleasantly surprised me more than anything else regarding aesthetics before we move on. The game has very, 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 very little FromSoft fan service or self-reference.
But has just the right amount.
Yeah,
which is next to none. It's kind of like what you would see, the amount you saw in like in DS2, or slightly less in terms of overall volume, which honestly abated my biggest fear of the game going in, which is that it would just be another rehash of the DS1 stuff. Hardly any of which actually makes it into the game, which that's great. So if you want something new from the company, the Elden Ring definitely delivers.
Yeah, I think the open world really helps the storytelling, because in Dark Souls, a lot of it is, okay, how did you get here?
Yes.
Like, it made some for some funny moments, like when Siegmeyer somehow managed to climb through a window in Anor Londo.
Right.
But it's like, how, and it makes more sense to have like these like branching storylines, and I've not done too many NPC quests, but they seem a bit more straightforward than go to this like random part of the map you've been to, be angered for no reason, get invaded by this like random thing. If you didn't talk to someone exactly 2 times, it was not going to happen. You've missed it for the entire playthrough.
There's still a lot of missable ones, but it would be nice if there was just some semblance of like a quest log, a journal that would help you like
I do agree with that.
Track of all it. Like, it doesn't even have to be like one place, just a key item that has a clue what to do next in the quest line. That'd be lovely.
So you
I
don't
do
go
agree on that.
get what you were doing.
And
Yeah.
not perfectly, but some of the lengthier, more intricate quest lines, in my experience, did have some semblance of that, where you would get like a key item and they'd give you a vague hint about maybe where it could be used or where it was from. And
Yes,
you're
some
only
would,
supposed to go there.
but not
It's
all of them.
not all of them, and not always are like the geographical tips provided in those entries even accurate for where you need to go.
No, because like for example, one questline said he's around here somewhere, other side of the fucking country.
Yes, yes, I think I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
You were talking about fan service earlier.
Mhm.
Of course, there is some fan service, but I think it was really subtle in how they did it. They didn't overdo it, like full on. Look at this boss. You've seen him before, or you've seen her before. But there were like some really funny stuff in there as well that I just picked up on. I think Eclipse can actually attest to this as well. A lot of people who play a lot of Souls games, like the Soul, I don't want to actually say the Souls elites, but like the people who really play a lot of Souls games know the last boss as the Plink Plonk boss, because there's this little tune that like a piano music that goes pling plong, and they actually put it in the Elden Ring intro music. That same those
Yes.
same two notes, and it just clicked with me instantly. So, oh, I recognize this one. This is from the last boss from PS3, and that is, well, fan service maybe, but it is fan service to people who actually really have a lot of time in these games, and not something people would like basic. Oh yeah, that's a direct copy of the. I don't think that the whole Souls community actually heard that. So yeah, I do feel it's they did some fan service, but they didn't overdo it in the way they did it with DS3 for the previous games.
Right, correct. And that's something I can appreciate. 99% of what you see or do in Elden Ring is technically new.
Yeah.
Depending on your interpretation of certain lore, um, one character who is like a series staple does reappear, and depending on your interpretation of certain lore, a different character appears as a wildly different person than they were in the original trilogy. And if I interpret that second character's lore properly, they turn like a fan favorite character into the most horrific person in Elden Ring, and I kind of love that. But so far, we tend to approve all of the narrative elements. I should point out as well, before we move on, this game has something like a dozen different endings, depending on which faction you side with, which quests you complete, and that's really cool. And as in DS3, as in Sekiro, if you meet the requirements for multiple endings, you'll be able to make a choice at the end of the game, which you would like. As long as you don't side with the, like, obviously evil faction and go for their ending. We'll come back around on the open world, but I think the next thing that all of us can appreciate, and I would like your thoughts on, are the incredible range of weapons, armors, and especially spells in the game. For reference, friends, unlike the multiple schools of sorcery, 3 by default in Dark Souls 1 and 3, 4 in DS2, Elden Ring has 2 major divisions of spells. Sorceries on one hand, performed with staves, and incantations, think miracles, performed with religious catalysts on the other. And within each of these divisions, which have simple stat scaling, like you need intelligence for sorceries, faith for invocations, almost like across the board, there within each of those categories, though, there are numerous different smaller schools of magic associated with factions, associated with certain mechanics or damage types. And so, while they haven't erected any mechanical barriers to accessing them, there's actually far more distinct schools of sorcery in the game. There's more types of weapons as well. I think there's more and more diverse gear in Elden Ring than there has been in any other FromSoft game, and I think we can all approve of that.
Yeah, I think so.
No, I can't speak on sorceries or miracles or stuff because I haven't I have only played one build, and my build had enough intellect to tie shoelaces, so I've never experienced anything with spells and stuff. What I do want to comment about is that the fact that the choice of weapons might be a little bit more, but the classes of weapons mostly stayed the same. I think the only thing that I saw added that I didn't see in previous games were flails.
And heavy thrusting swords. They bring twin blades back.
Yeah, that's
all like great weapons are now merged into a new category with their own moveset. There are ballistae now.
Oh yeah, I haven't bothered with those. But if you like talk about colossal weapons like the great hammer, the great axe, what is it called? The great sword. They fall under colossal hammer. Then you got your great sword, the somewhat smaller ones, which we did have, but we didn't have it like in a classification kind of way. We just knew it was different because of the moveset that it had.
Yeah.
So saying that there's like a lot of new variety, I wouldn't say so. There is a lot of new weapons that come into the same class that the previous games have had before, but they have more diversity to them.
But they added variety through weapon arts.
Yes.
Plenty of it. Like there's
something else we need to talk about. So weapon arts were present in DS3, right? Mainly as a way for players who were not inclined towards magic to make use of the new like mana bar, or I should say the mana bar they reintroduced from Demon Souls. And for those who aren't aware, weapon arts were techniques by which players could activate special skills tied to individual weapons. Like maybe you enter a special stance and perform really powerful blows with a greatsword, or you temporarily buff your power while wielding an axe or a club or something. It's usually something simple and accessible. And for the most part, DS3 weapon arts were kind of underwhelming, yeah? Not awful, just not like a game changer most of the time.
The ones that were good always had this like really weird caveat to them.
Uh-huh.
Like
give an example. Give an example.
I'm trying to think. The Onyx Twin Blade had a good weapon art, but the triple damage scaling killed that weapon late game.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So that's an example. Another one would be the Dancer Twin Blade. Again, triple weapon scale killed it late game.
Mm-hmm.
Or the Millwood the Millwood axe had a really cool war cry, but there was this like dumb run up that killed it, and like you couldn't like quickly activate it when you can activate war cry. There was this dumb run up that left you wide open to anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And compared to the payoff you would often get in terms of damage, in terms of buffs, not always, not across the board, but I found that if you weren't already running an intelligence or a magic-focused build and just using this weapon or its weapon art on the side, generally the weapon arts worth using drain so much mana for so little ROI in terms of damage or benefits that they really seldom were worth it.
Yeah.
Like, weapon arts were a super cool system and a great way to make magic or magic points accessible to non-caster builds, but it definitely felt like they needed some polish. And in Elden Ring, they got just that. You are now able to collect weapon arts independently of like weapons they would be tied to in DS3. And from a very early on in the game, attach any weapon art to any non-special weapon, think like boss weapons, legendary gear you find at the end of optional dungeons and things like that.
Which, I'll be honest, it still annoys me because the one boss weapon I have right now sucks.
Yeah, it
does. It would be fine if I changed the weapon art, but I can't change the weapon art. And the weapon art sucks.
There are a lot of weapons with fixed arts that are nigh useless, unfortunately. Well, I'm sure you'd have to make an entire build around them, kind of like I did. But I do appreciate the fact that for generic weapons now, you can replace their special ability with something that's better suited to your moveset. and then doing so often usually changes your weapon's parameters, like what types of damage it deals, what its scaling is. Think like they combined weapon arts and infusion from previous titles, but Eclipse is right. The inflexibility of special weapons is still a little frustrating.
Yeah, it's been a problem with FromSoft across the board. Like, boss weapons are either busted or useless.
Yes. Yes,
like,
exactly.
Busted, think Quailag's Fury Sword. Useless, think Orange Theron's Spear.
Okay. Fair enough. But Smog's Hammer is definitely great stuff.
Yeah, but would you say Smog's Hammer is really a special weapon, or is it just a bigger hammer?
It's a bigger hammer. That makes it special.
Fair, but you know what I mean. Like
I think the only drawback is that it takes 1/3 of the screen, so you won't be able to tell what's in front of you. But that's a
when I talk about boss weapons being useless or busted, I'm mainly talking about the ones that are like more unique.
Mm-hmm.
Those with unique abilities or damage types or things like that. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like a Frayed Blade from DS3, for instance.
Which is cool, but has no scaling in the dark at all for no reason.
Like, beautiful, unique spread of damage types, cool usage of its weapon art, and it doesn't scale, and you can't compel it to by any means.
Yeah, like I think the dark scaling, correct me if I'm wrong, was about, on a +4 or +5, it was about 70 plus like 20, and I'm like, that's 90 damage on a late game super boss weapon for dark.
Yeah, it was maybe a little more, but not much. That sounds about right.
Like, the Frayed Blade did about 270 damage to the endgame, to Frida, okay? I could make a weapon do twice that, using dark damage.
And for reference for our listeners who aren't aware, the Frayed Blade is one of the weapons out of the entire Dark Souls trilogy with the highest stat requirements, so level investment, specialized build required to wield it, and also a reward you only receive by bringing down probably the most dull, tedious super boss in the entire trilogy. It is like considered the or one of the ultimate rewards of the entire set of games.
I would like to bring up the Cos Parasite from Bloodborne as well.
Yeah, but that one at least could change your moveset for PvP.
Okay, fair enough.
I haven't played Bloodborne, so I can't relate.
And you get to flop around, which is fun. I love the dodge animation associated with it.
Yeah, I agree there. If you're going to make a weapon art, like if you're going to make a weapon useless, make it funny useless.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just make the stats suck. Make it funny useless.
I mean, I like the one they added the Serpent Hunter, which is basically like the
Stormruler.
Yeah, basically just like the Stormruler. That was actually pretty fun.
Yeah, I can't. I haven't used it, so I don't.
That was fun, except for one thing we'll get to 2 points down the list. But okay, we like the world, we like the aesthetics, we like the lore, we like the general range of gear that's available to you. This segues perfectly into the first topic where I think we're not going to disagree with each other at any point, but each of us are going to appreciate the game probably in different respects. Let's talk about some of the new non-combat oriented systems, specifically the open world, whereby Elden Ring sets players loose in these massive countries teeming with optional dungeons, filled, by the way, with unique bosses and gear that can't be found anywhere else, bosses roaming freely around the overworld landscape, and just kind of sets them free with vague guiding, and the crafting system that is derived or integrated into the game to make use of materials and little consumable treasures you can get from enemies in the overworld. How do we feel about both of these and the way they're integrated into the formula?
I'm not a big fan of the crafting system. It's a good idea. It's just that I have almost 85 hours in the game, and I haven't really used it much or needed to use it much. And it's locked way too much behind progression and finding little secret merchants all around the map.
Yeah, you do have to tell that for the crafting, you get crafting recipes by finding cookbooks. So you have to
Yeah.
find, you have to go around the world, and either through a vendor you can maybe get a cookbook, or you find somewhere in a dungeon in a chest you find a cookbook. But if you don't have the book, you won't be able to craft it, and you might end up somewhere in a late game facing a boss that does a particular kind of damage, and you want to protect yourself against that damage by making craftables, and find out that you never had that cookbook to begin with.
Yeah.
So you have to go all the way back and find it. That's I think it's a downside. I think it's also something that comes with the fact that it's an open world game. So if you look at other open world games in general, crafting systems are 90% always there. It's like a thing that's just, it's, oh, you're making an open world game, oh, you have to have a crafting system.
Yeah.
It's like it has to be in the game. And I think From Software probably, I don't know, they don't have that much experience with crafting systems or the way it works.
Oh, they don't.
They did a fair job though. I don't
Yeah.
want to say that they did a bad job on it. I don't feel it was good enough. It could have been better, but I didn't hate it as such.
So
Yeah, I mean, they had to put it in because
Yeah,
the scale of the game is so big that if you wanted to just give the players the necessary amount of like consumables, for people who preferred to use consumables, I for example don't, so I haven't used it much.
Mhm.
They would have just had to litter every piece of the floor with items.
And there are so many consumables to choose from. That's also pretty staggering, actually. More
Mhm.
than in previous games.
But it's nice that like if you find where a material is found in the open world, you can just reload and come pick it back up. It's not like, oh, you picked it
Yeah.
up here, now it's permanently gone.
it
For
regrows.
some things. For some
Yeah.
things.
For some
Sometimes.
things, yeah.
Now, Eclipse, how did you feel about all of that?
Okay. Crafting system, I think, is an interesting idea. I think my
Mhm.
issue with it isn't just the cookbooks, or the cookbooks are a problem. I think it's the fact that too many times I found myself, okay, I have 20 of one item, and I have one of this other item, and I need to combine them together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So I can only make one, even though I've roamed around and found 20 things. But to add to that, for the open world, I find the dungeons way too hard to find sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's this massive 50-foot cliff face, and it's this tiny little 6-foot cave. It's too that's hidden behind a bush.
That's often like shadowed and in the vicinity of a larger, much more ostentatious enemy or element of scenery or something like that.
Or it just blends in so well that you can't see it. Like, to be fair, I'll completely. I'm running on low graphics, so I don't melt my fucking PC. So that might be an issue, but I don't think so. The game still looks gorgeous on low graphics, by the way. But I don't think so, because I've combed that map for 3 hours sometimes and found one dungeon.
Yeah, a lot of them are quite difficult to spot, and
the issue I find is in a FromSoft game where your weapon equipment is so important. Like, for example, a certain boss. Okay, I went in +5, and Potato was like, "Oh, you're not doing a lot of damage." I'm like, "Fair." And I haven't found anything else. I was missing one crafting item that I needed, because the smithing tables go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Could not find 3. Could not find 3 for the life of me.
And if you can't find 3, you're stuck with an underpowered weapon. And the game does kind of presume that you have a fairly well-developed weapon quite a bit earlier than I was expecting.
Yeah. As soon as I found 3, boss died in 1 hit. Boss died in 1 go. But until I had 3, the boss stayed alive long enough to kill me by attrition.
And on the back of that, I generally enjoyed the open world, and I thought the crafting system was fun, kind of cute, albeit unnecessary, as Exit pointed out, and Potato as well. But I do have issues with both, and Eclipse, I definitely see where you're coming from, because, okay, The crafting system, I think, is ideal for players, and there are many of them who want to run a consumable, like, buff and ranged focused build, right? You can make, like, your own arrows, your own throwing darts and knives.
That
and
I do
all.
like. I think it's more organic than actually buying them.
That is fair. That is fair. I didn't use it to make much more than, like, status effect prevention items, but I did appreciate the fact that, like, when you find these little quote-unquote cookbooks that give you recipes for collectibles, they're all tied to different factions in the world, and based on, like, just the title, who created your cookbook, you already know, oh, I'm gonna get access to, like, that faction's damage type or that faction's gear, which is fun. But I was disappointed that none of these recipes, none of these blueprints allowed you to, say, craft faction-specific weapons or armor, or unique spell catalysts, anything like that. Things that would feel like more significant, worthwhile rewards. And seconding Eclipse's concern regarding optional dungeons and how easy they are to miss, while also feeling very, very mandatory for progression or development, I wish those merchants we mentioned earlier, because they're all over the place, these traveling nomadic merchants who, like, set up campfires and will sell you a handful of items per site, usually including an armor set, maybe a weapon if you're lucky, some consumables, and a tip or two about, like, enemies in the area. I wish, because they feel useless more often than not, I wish that you could buy, like, pre-marked maps from them that would place a handful of indicators on your actual world map indicating nearby dungeons or optional encounters in that area with, like, maybe vague descriptive text of what each of them would be, to show you, like, hey, think, much as I hate to say it, the equivalent of an Assassin's Creed tower, right? Here is generally a variety of points of interest in the area you probably want to go investigate at some point. That would make the merchants, who also fuel the crafting system by selling cookbooks mined, feel more purposeful, even for players who didn't engage with them for the purpose of obtaining consumables or crafting items. And it would ease, I think, some of the frustration that could come from missing a dungeon that just so happened to contain a piece of gear that'd be perfect for your build. Remembering that most open world games, including the best of the best like Breath of the Wild, have pretty similar systems. I do think that could be improved. And my final thought, I know, I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, but I have this written down, regarding the open world, is I love the optional dungeons, many of which have elite versions of regular enemies as bosses, something some people dislike, but I don't particularly mind, because the boss kind of foreshadows what type of cool reward you're going to get. And many of these small optional side dungeons award the player with new weapons, new spells, new armor. The reward is almost always something significant that you can equip, that you can use, that can change the way you play. And yeah, it can be really frustrating to miss out on them when that thrill of discovery during a delve is that discovery, that exploration, something that Elden Ring does better than any other FromSoft title. I just wish they had made it maybe a little bit more accessible, so people could really get their teeth sunken into that aspect of the game. However, it's a long game, it's a big game world, and I'm really sorry to say that in the back half of the game, after maybe about the first 3 countries or so, the abundance of optional dungeons, like tripping over them this way, that way, all over the place, throwing new gear and spells at you, dries up almost entirely. The last couple of countries have next to no optional dungeons. A handful here, a smattering there. But exploration and really trying to immerse yourself in those areas feels far less rewarding because there is such a relative scarcity of things to see and do off the beaten path in the later game. And I think that's something they probably should have spent more time on, more evenly dispersing this optional content throughout the game.
I have something to say about that. Because we were discussing this earlier, and I gave it some thought. And I think the main reason is that they didn't put that many dungeons in the later game is that you are already set and locked with the build that you have. Introducing new weapons, new armor, new spells in later game dungeons would only upset it, because then you would think, oh wait, I've just put so many runes into this build and in this spec because I've been playing with this armor set or playing with this weapon for so long. Now I have to switch it all up. I have to go back. I have to farm all the upgrade items that I need to upgrade the weapon, or upgrade. Or I need to farm runes so I can rechange my build. It. I think that is one of the reasons that there is not that many, and the ones that are there are very, very specific. It's probably a talisman, which is an upgrade from a previous talisman, or it's a cookbook again, or something like that. It's something not like weapon changing, gear changing. Either
I
that,
see.
or it's going to be like really, really specific, like an upgrade to a build that people are using at that moment and locked into from that time. I think that is the main reason. The other reason might be, and this is something that I was going to say about the open world, is that upgrade materials should be easy to collect. If you
Yeah.
are, for instance, if you do change a weapon, of course you need to go back and farm all that stuff again, but you don't want to farm it in an area that is going to be high level. You want to go back to the first section and then go
Right.
back and look for it. What I do miss about it, though, and this is just a small quality of life thing, is that the map remembers where you picked something up. Because what I was struggling with is that, oh wait, I need to make because of the particular boss that Potato is now working on. It requires me to get a certain item to ward off a negative status effect, and to ward it off, I need 3 ingredients, and I had to look up where I had to get that third ingredient from, because I had no idea. It was so long ago, and
And there's so many of them.
yeah, and I had to like really look for. Okay, it's that cave. Oh yeah, that's all the way in the beginning. Now I know where to go and and that's something. That's a quality of life thing that I would love to have added. Maybe it's a little bit too much information, because I know the Souls community don't like to get that much information. It's the really of you have to write it down yourselves, or you're gonna look it up on wiki pages or whatever. But the game will never tell you. Like
But
Okay.
wait, Exit. You're talking about crafting now, crafting materials.
crafting materials, and
You know that when
navigating
you
those.
open like the crafting menu, every material says like the approximate location where you can find it.
Oh.
Smoldering butterfly found near wildfires and elsewhere. Roa fruit easily found everywhere in the lands between.
Yeah, well, that's well, I would have loved to have it on the map. Just if you open the map,
Yeah.
you got open a filter saying I need this item, and then it shows you on the map where you already found it, not the ones that you haven't found, of course. I mean, if you haven't found it, then it doesn't show up anything. But if you went to a cave, for instance, I was looking for cave moss, and then I said, well, put the filter on cave moss, and then it shows me the caves that I've already been to, and show me that there was cave moss there. Voila. I would have enjoyed that a little bit more than a fucking fake description of, oh yeah, it can be found somewhere around this area.
I get you. So, well, before we carry on, Eclipse, do you have any further thoughts about what all we've discussed, since you've been kind of quiet for a while?
I just think that like it's kind of like similar to almost as if like imagine the large ember or like the divine ember even like was in the Great Hollow.
Yeah.
The catacombs would now be a nightmare. Like I don't mind it being like not in the catacombs. Like I don't need it to be right next to the place it's needed, but it has to be in somewhere you're expected to be able to find without a wiki, a guide, or pure dumb luck.
Or a free weekend, right?
Yeah. Like, yes, sure. Some people maybe find it really easy, but that doesn't mean it is easy to find.
And
like,
it doesn't
do you guys agree with me that some of the dungeons are like just really, really, you either stumble across them or you don't?
I missed a fair few of them in the first couple of countries and had to use a map to go back through and say, like, oh, I cleared this, I cleared that. So,
how many of you people use the wiki page or something similar?
I've used it twice.
I missed an entire major plot-relevant dungeon for my entire playthrough because the means you need to take to travel there are absolutely arcane. Get this, friends. To travel to an area presided over by one of the big enemies you're meant to kill, although you can face them by other means, which is what I did, you have to let one specific instance of one specific enemy, very dangerous enemy, in an hidden area inside of an entirely separate dungeon in another country kill you with one specific attack. If you do not do that, you are missing out on an entire, like, city's worth of content.
No, brother. No. Wrong. There's plenty of other ways to get there. Plenty of more intended ways.
Yep.
That was a way to the secret boss. And that was not, like, I didn't even manage, like, I got there. I managed to kill the boss in the end. I did not notice that there was a way to get from there to the fucking manor.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That was the least connected thing to the manor.
Yeah. No. You misunderstand me. I meant you will miss out on that entire dungeon.
That dungeon is super small.
But it contains virtually all of the content and unique enemies related to that zone.
Yeah, but you can actually get back to it from the other end. That's what he's trying to say. So if you go into the other route to getting to that manor, you can actually get out the manor, go into the cave, and then you will go in backwards.
But I didn't even find a way to go from the cave to the manor.
This kind of proves Eclipse's point somewhat, I think, about pathfinding.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's got the usual FromSoft obscure BS that some people enjoy, some people don't, some people are just kind of modeling on.
It's the same thing they did in previous games. Can we talk about the Nameless King and the dragon? The only way to reach doing a certain emote. Come on,
that's what I said. It's the same basic thing.
But they did it in the multiplayer because this is not the only one. And I think we're trading into spoiler territory anyway. So there is one place that you can only get to if you get a certain NPC Phantom Invader that you need to kill, and when you've done it, you have to search around, and there should be a teleporter that just opened because of him dying, and that teleporter brings you. So stuff like that, I thought it was really funky and interesting, but it's just one of those things that you could talk to your friends about. Oh, have you found this? I've seen this happen. Oh, I've seen that happen. And that's
like it's the kind of thing that before the age of the internet and like mass technology would have almost certainly have rendered all of these games, mind you, and from not Demon Souls, but DS1 on, they've all done it to an extent. The type of like design and progression that would have rendered a game either a very obscure like niche hit or a complete non-starter. Mm-hmm. So they're very much a product of the times in that regard.
Yeah. Go for it. No, I don't mind like obscure stuff. I don't mind it at all. I don't mind like little secrets, that like you take like the community takes years to find. Little secrets, awesome. But please don't have an entire crafting or like upgrade material completely off the map unless you go to specific points that you can easily miss.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agree with that. One thing I was going to offer an opinion on before we move on into probably what's going to be our most divisive topic, parentheses, what'll be the most fun for you guys in the audience. Regarding the open world is Exit, I think your theories for like the reasoning behind dungeon or optional content distribution are perfectly valid, and I want to say they informed some of the decisions made in regard to like world design in the back half of the game. But there's also that part of me that remembers that this is still largely the same team that made the back half of DS1, which involved a lot of really short, choppy, and in one case, half-finished dungeons, and the back, quarter of Sekiro, where main plotline bosses were reused ad nauseum, apropos of nothing in many cases. So just generally, this studio delivers a rock solid, first 50 to 60% of a game, in my experience, and the back half it's not bad, but it kinda lags a little. That's just one of their, I guess, flaws they've yet to totally buff out. But when you're making projects this intricate, that's gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
Actually, let me...
They definitely went into content that they have never been venturing in before. So yeah,
that's correct.
There's going to be some
mistakes will be made.
But on that note, let's shift gears and talk about something that FromSoft has a lot of experience with. A lot of experience with. And the one aspect of the game that none of us, almost 51 minutes into this episode, have actually spoken about directly, and for good reason. It's time to talk about combat. Elden Ring uses what I can best describe as a heavily modified version of Dark Souls 3's combat pacing and mechanics, to various degrees of success. I'm going to level with you right now. 2 of the people present on this panel were quite fond of Elden Ring's combat, and 2 of us are not. Because a number of changes were made to balancing with, I believe, the principal intent of veteran-proofing the game. But before I dive in, guys, just hit me with your thoughts. How do you feel about Elden Ring combat specifically? Because I think we all agree, out of combat, the game feels really friggin' good in your hands. Not much debate there, but let me know, what was your combat experience like, and how do you think it stacks up to not just other FromSoft experiences, but other Souls-likes you've played?
Where do you want to go start first?
I can start. For me, it was one of the better combat systems I've had so far. Mm-hmm. I gotta admit, I did enjoy the Bloodborne one where aggressiveness paid off, because that's how I play. I just go face. But this was fun. I mean, there was plenty of bullshit hitboxes and bullshit hits that, this should not have hit me in any fucking way. But I feel like it might have this artificial feel of it being so many of them, because there is so many bosses compared to Dark Souls 1 or 3, that didn't have as many bosses. But I don't know. I enjoyed it. I mean, for the most part. I always had some bullshit encounters. I will admit.
I have a very virile idea of combat. I think if you happen to get the right build where you can bum rush, stagger a boss to death,
yes,
you will rinse it.
Yes.
If you can't, it will be like grinding teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it feels like they made certain, I don't want to say cheesy, but they made very, very exploitation-centric builds available to the player, and maybe in part to counter that, they then designed the bosses to be just as exploitative.
I've seen people say this compares to DS3, and I'm like, if this compared to DS3, I would not be having any issues.
Same here, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very broad generalization of something that is completely not true.
Yeah, I don't think
it does have something from DS3, because I know. Plus, let me ask you, Eclipse, what build did you use? What was your go-to style? What did you do?
Good question. I haven't really. I'm mainly using the longsword with the Ashes of War, the bloody slash. I mean.
Oh, that you do the swipe up thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that Potato Moto here uses mainly a Dex build with a what is it, Uchikatana?
Yeah, was using an Uchi. I'm right now using just for fun the hook claws.
Oh, okay, cool.
I would
Lots
have
of bleed on
swapped
that one.
weapon. I would have swapped weapon if I hadn't dumped every smithing stone I found into that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, if you have trouble finding those smithing stones and getting getting them from vendors, then that's then you
Which
feel
is
locked out
something-
of other stuff. Yeah,
Which is something I don't think they've done particularly well past DS1.
it gets better.
Yeah, but it gets better how many hours into the game.
No, it gets better. It gets better if you're lucky enough to find one of those bell bearings, which
Yeah.
you're not guaranteed to find. Like that should be tied through progression. You know, you've killed this boss. At this point, you should be having these like materials on hand whenever you wanted to, so you can easily swap to weapons. It doesn't have to be like the, you know, if you're like right now at +6s or something like that, you don't have to get +6s, but at least +4s. You know, just so you can get a new weapon close to it.
Yeah.
And for reference by our friends in the audience, bell bearings are items that expand the like main hub's shop offerings. So in certain, again, as Eclipse pointed out, optional side dungeons, you can earn bell bearings that make weapon reinforcement materials of certain grades available more or less infinitely for a certain cost.
Yeah, compare it to the ashes of the vendors that you find in DS3 that you can hand in with the handmaiden, and she will.
But a lot more of them.
Yeah, definitely.
I've only found one.
I'm only missing one. So
I do like the fact though that every time like a major NPC would die, or you would kill it if you're a mean person, you'd get their bell bearing, which would open up their inventory. So it's not like, you know, they died, you just lost out. So that they did nice.
Just like in DS3, yeah.
But to get back to the point, I've played a strength, mostly a strength build because I like my boy big and chunky.
Sure.
And I in DS3 I always try to start new classes and whatnot. I always end up going back to my strength build and saying, yeah, this is the way I want to play. And I did feel in Elden Ring that I was playing DS3 strength build capable characters in there, with the caveat that they of course changed some of the combat. So we haven't talked about this yet, but they added new things to it. So like for instance, the guard break is one of the most perfect things that I've ever encountered. If you hold up your shield, normally if the Souls veterans will know that if you have a shield, you can parry a strike depending on which shield you have and how good your timing reaction is. My timing reaction is shit. That's why I don't like playing Sekiro, because it's so based on parrying. But in this game, if you don't know how to parry or you don't like to parry that much, you can also hold out your shield, and when an enemy hits you and you press R2, you will do a guard break. So it will do not more damage, but more damage to their hyper armor, which makes it easier for you to stun them, so you can get a critical hit in.
Allow you to stun them in the vein of landing a parry. Yeah, you can kind of work your way towards it with this more accessible maneuver, which is really cool.
Yeah, so all the enemies, and you, by the way, as well, have some sort of hidden mechanic called hyper armor, which means that that's something that they did in Sekiro as well. If you keep hitting somebody over and over and over again, that hyper armor will go down, 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 down. And when it hits 0, you will be stunned. You will fall to the ground, and you will be open for a critical hit, or for a visceral strike in Bloodborne terms. Bosses have that as well. So if you would look a charge attack, or you would jump, the jump button is also a thing that we've never had before. If you jump in and do a jumping attack, that would break their hyper armor faster. And the guard break is a similar thing, that if you guard and if you block and they strike you when you have your shield out, you can follow it up with this big axe strike that will kick that hyper armor down significantly, opening it up for critical strikes later if you keep up the damage. And those are one of those mechanics that I really, really enjoyed and really played well with, because I never had that before, but it just clicked for me, because I felt it was part of the game. It was something that it was,
It's the
but it never
best
felt.
addition to the combat.
But it felt like it was always there, but I never knew. So that's what I meant with it felt like Dark Souls 3, with the caveat that the new stuff also felt like familiar to me, even though it was new. And
Now,
that's something that I do have to comment from Soft on, that they really did that, and that they outshined it on that, the combat.
Now, I agree with you completely about the utility of the block counter and the fact that several small quality of life adjustments were positive. But where I'm going to offer a counterpoint, a different perspective, is in regard to the idea that it largely feels like DS3. Now, player control and animations do. Your character moves largely the same way they would in Dark Souls 3. Animations and timings, what appear to be the recovery timings on your animations do. That all looks very similar, just as DS1 and DS2 look similar. However, in active combat, maybe not against rank and file enemies like Eclipse, you may have noticed, maybe not against wolves and knights and things like that, but against more significant enemies like bosses, this feels very, very, very far removed from DS3, not because of the way the character feels or controls, but because of how the game has elected to react to player action. Let me explain. In previous Souls titles, especially DS1 and DS2, from DS1 on, because the team noticed that blocking with a big shield or something was maybe a little too effective in DS1, they kind of scaled its effectiveness back somewhat beginning in Dark Souls 2 and never really approached that level of applicability again. But your go-to, your principal maneuver for dealing with enemies, provided you didn't want to risk that super chancy parry maneuver that Exit mentioned, which requires picture-perfect timing, is dodging. Now, you have access usually to a quick little kind of back step that is useless in most cases, but by pressing the control stick in a certain direction and pressing the B or circle button, you're able to execute a dodge roll that gives you a certain number of iframes concomitant to the amount or the combined weight of all your gear. The lighter your gear is, the more iframes you're probably going to receive, barring a couple exceptions. And from Dark Souls 2 on, and this includes Bloodborne, which had some chancy hitboxes, kind of like the ones Potato mentioned here and there, and maybe didn't always give players the openings it should have, but was their first time experimenting with a fast-paced combat system, and they did generally really well with it. That dodge roll is your best friend for getting around any type of attack that does not have a considerable area of effect, or leave behind lingering residual fields of damage. Think creep or DOT spells. And with the exception of Sekiro, that's been your go-to in every title. And in Dark Souls 3, your dodge roll and your iframes, provided you're not playing a character so heavy that they don't have access to very many iframes at all, and you have to be very heavy for that in Dark Souls 3, that dodge roll feels immaculate. If an attack is coming your way and you roll just as the enemy swings, it's going to clip through you, provided you didn't roll away from the enemy. You're going to get a brief opening, and you're going to be able to continue this dance with your opponent, reacting with a dodge as their animation begins, not the wind-up for an attack, but as the follow-through begins, and you're going to be able to consistently dodge all but the most daunting, or again, some very particular attacks. In Elden Ring, I believe in large part due to the team's quite demonstrative commitment to what I call veteran proofing, that is providing challenges by way of ameliorating popular strategies players would use in previous games, no matter how integral to the mechanics they were. Something they've done in Bloodborne, something they did in DS3, something they're doing again here. Your dodge roll, despite the game communicating that it's still the ideal way to avoid most maneuvers in melee range, is nigh on useless in many enemy encounters because of some very fundamental changes to design. In my eyes, these are as follows. 1. Enemies now modify the length of their follow-through animations, not their priming animations, in order to respond to players rolling. So, for instance, an enemy reaches back with his massive cane. You know exactly the enemy I'm thinking of. He's not going to stand there with it cocked at his shoulder for 2 or 3 seconds and then follow through. He's going to start moving towards you with the cane, and if you're rolling, he's going to wait, and fire that attack off after a 3-second delay or a very slight beginning to the follow-through animation, rather than the standard, 1-second delay. In other words, bosses and other significant enemies now react to player reaction to their animations, allowing the game to, and I'm sure it doesn't do this exactly, but in essence, read your inputs and immediately put in place a countermeasure to punish whatever strategy you've used to attempt to navigate the maneuver that was just telegraphed to you. Another way bosses in particular like to do this is by launching mammoth combos that oftentimes will allow players to dodge a certain attack only to fire a second attack off as soon as their invincibility frames end, and that they therefore then either cannot dodge or would block, have all of their stamina drained, and then be open to the next 5, 6, 7 hits of the combo. Furthermore, more than any other entry in the series, even though Bloodborne had some of it, and even though DS3's super bosses did it to a very limited extent, attacks track like there's no tomorrow in Elden Ring. If you are 180 degrees behind certain enemies, some of their attacks, their sword swings, if you run behind them, once they start swinging, they will pivot on the spot and somehow manage to hit you with a powerful overhead blow. The rule in other games, Sekiro included, was once the follow-through starts, usually the attack arc is locked, right? Eclipse, am I right about that? Usually, as soon as the follow-through starts, that's it.
And it wasn't locked in the sense you couldn't walk around it, but if you rolled or sprinted, it was not going to follow you more than, say, 30 degrees.
Right. And in addition to that, Elden Ring has far more area of effect attacks than any other entry in the franchise. And I don't mean just because there's a larger volume of content, there are more of them by number. A larger proportion of bosses' movesets constitute area of effect attacks. What this means is rolling and dodging, hell, blocking in general, feels increasingly imprecise, unreliable, and it doesn't feel as though, in many cases, and I feel the need to foreground this by saying I probably, out of the playthroughs I've seen so far, somehow had one of the easier times with the game. Didn't get stuck on anything, and didn't find many boss encounters absolutely maddening. I just found a lot of them kind of frustrating and dull because I took a lot of hits. It felt like I probably shouldn't have, and still managed to rinse it. So it didn't feel as reactive, it didn't feel as dynamic, and it didn't feel anywhere near as rewarding, nor did the punishments I received feel as valid or as deserved as they did in DS3, Sekiro, Bloodborne, anywhere else, because it seems like difficulty took precedence over sensible mechanical design in many fights, and still didn't achieve the intended result. I'm sorry, I know I've been yammering for a long time, but
Wait, what? I just woke up. What did I miss?
The sum total of my issues with this.
Can I offer a counterpoint on this?
Go ahead.
Okay, so what I know what the one of the things that we talked about earlier off the stream and off podcast is basically one of the wombo combo things that we saw with one particular boss. I'm not going to name any names, but you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. What I did figure out is they did change something about the whole aggro system. So this game has in previous games has had it as well. They have a very linear aggro system, which means that if somebody hits him, they will get aggro. It doesn't matter how much damage it is, as long as it hits him and it does damage, that person will get the aggro. If then somebody else hits it, when he's focusing somebody else, he will turn around and he will go into the other direction. But in the previous games, it was like if it starts a combo or like a string of attacks that you know that is recognizable for that particular boss, it will finish that whole string before it turns around and goes back to the other one who already hit him and was actually going to get the aggro. What I've noticed
Usually,
is that if, for instance, during that free hit combo that we saw with this boss, if the other person would do damage to it, it will get the aggro, but it won't wait until the end of the sequence to switch to that particular target. And that's why we saw the boss turning around mid combo and then launching the combo at the other person who actually should have gotten the aggro, but it will now not do the whole sequence anymore. And that, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because if it's good to see that it's like it gets really frantic and you get like what the fuck is going on moments. And then but it also it gives me more the feeling that yeah, it's unpredictable now. I have to be aware of that, something that like that can happen and will happen. That if you have instigated a roll to get out of the combo, the boss would have turned around and you actually roll into the combo that you were trying to roll out of because of the target switch that just happened. I do have to say, for the people who haven't played this game this much, is that they did introduce a new mechanic that makes you not always play by yourself. Like in the older games, you could like summon people in, or there were like NPCs that you could do a quest line for that you would be able to summon in. But in this game, you actually get a lot of choice of like summons, but they are not really summons. They are like puppets that are controlled by you, and they do feel like an extra player helping you out. So you are never ever, you don't have to face an enemy alone. You will always have someone or somebody beside you to help you. And that mechanic, I think they did that whole sequence thing, breaking sequence, just to be able to counter that, because you won't be able to play. You don't play alone. You play with something of someone else. Therefore, they have to adapt to the fact that some things can happen. But it does feel like it's cheap. That you feel like, oh man, I was going to dodge out of it. I saw her coming. I was going to dodge, and then that boss just turned around 180 degrees, went for my other player that is out, and then I just rolled into the fucking combo and I died. And that feels cheap, but on the other hand, it also feels fair, because the other end of the spectrum would be that it would be too easy. If they did not do that and they let the whole sequence run, it's just gonna be ping pong, tank and spank, and let's call it a day. Next boss, please. And
hold on now.
No, that's my opinion. That's my opinion about it.
It's cheap, but if they didn't do it, it would be too easy. That suggests to me, then, that the entire encounter, or perhaps the entire system, then, may benefit from a rebalance. Because I believe cheap tactics, whether on the player's part or on the developer's part as kind of their adversaries, should never feel requisite for delivering like an enjoyable final product.
Whoa, you're understanding me wrong. I said it feels cheap. It's not cheap. It's just trying to like spice up the fight and make you aware that something like that can happen. It just feels like you're being tricked, or it feels like the game is being cheap on you and trying to kill you because they think you're stupid. It's not like it feels that way, but it isn't. But it's also something that you have to get used to the fact that the gameplay, although it does feel a lot like Souls and Bloodborne games, and maybe a little bit of Sekiro, I fucking hope not, because I hate that game, is that there are so many new stuff in there that you can use and employ to your advantage. And we had the discussion before that I found one of the things that is new in this game that you can use is called the weapon arts that you can switch.
Yeah.
So I found this weapon art, which is completely overpowered. In my understanding, I feel it's completely overpowered and I'm cheating the game. But it is in the game. And the bosses, like Brady said, the bosses feel cheap as well. So you can feel cheap as well. You should be able to feel cheap as well. But is it then still cheap? or is it something else?
Yes.
Is it something that we're not used to, which feels like it could be cheap, but it is just a faction in the game that we have to embrace and learn how to live with? Because this is not a Souls game. This is called Elden Ring, not Elden Souls.
Okay, Eclipse, would you mind giving us a little information? Because you're a DS3 challenge run expert. I really want your opinion on
I have
that.
a lot of counterpoints to this. Okay,
Same
one,
here.
was Bloodborne not a Souls game because it wasn't called Blood Souls?
It wasn't. But it
Oh yeah,
wasn't.
you're gonna trip me on that one? Thanks.
Well,
But
no,
it was
like,
different.
I'm sorry, like,
But it was
like,
also
there's the
different.
one.
Yeah,
It was different, but the fundamental like design of you can 1v1 every boss was there.
Yes, it was.
And yeah, some of the Bloodborne bosses were a bit weird because they weren't used to dealing with player being able to be that aggressive, that mobile. So they maybe overtuned the bosses. But they dialed it back for DS3 while still being powerful and aggressive. The player was still fast and aggressive, but they weren't as fast and aggressive, and neither were the bosses.
And for the most part in DS3, attacks were perfectly telegraphed, and I will tell you, across 2.5 playthroughs, if something hits you in DS3, you're probably going to feel like it should have.
Or you figure out why it hit you, and then you dodge differently.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hit you.
You learn the move and adapt.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I, as someone who did the entirety of DS3, basically no hitting a lot of bosses, like especially the endgame stuff, because if they hit me, I died. I still can't learn Margit because Margit learns me.
And Margit,
I am not using anything that would make Margit change aggro. It is me by myself. If Margit is changing aggro against me, that is fundamentally unfair.
Mm-hmm. And because there were, I think, earlier in our previous discussions made between like this combat and Sekiro's, I think that may not be an entirely fair comparison because of the reactivity. In Sekiro, for instance, your block, your deflection, is the principal means by which everything from lowly bandits to like massive deific dragons can or should, well, actually not the dragon, that's a bad example, smaller dragons can and should be rebuffed, worn down, just that one mechanic applied a bunch of different ways. If you do not need your sword, your deflection to deal with something, a special warning sign, like a red damage indicator, will flash on screen, not telling you how to react, but that you're going to have to react differently. Sekiro lets you know what's coming in a way that you can react to, and react to consistently once you learn how the game wants to communicate to you. In Elden Ring, again, with the way bosses respond mid-combat, sometimes mid-swing, to what players are doing to respond to the signs they've been given, I don't feel like that same range of reliable options will ever be available to the player. And for players who want to do special challenge runs, like Eclipse's low health run or low level runs, it's going to make the experience far more frustrating. And if you want to do it without the summons, which are very nice for the record, but I feel shouldn't be mandatory, it's going to feel far less pleasant. But sorry, the equivalent of Elden Ring's combat in Sekiro would be a boss slashing at you 3 or 4 times, and then once you block all 4 of them with the sword without a damage indicator, grabbing your sword out of your hands without any input, throwing it over the side of a castle wall, and just snapping your neck. Because, well, slashing you didn't work. It feels like design by or around attrition in certain encounters. Is that fair to say, Eclipse? Is that like roughly concomitant with your experience? Like, if we can't like wear you down with telegraphed attacks, we're just gonna have to find some way to get that chip damage in there.
Yeah, like I have had Margit. I have dodged an entire combo of Margits, and the thing is, you dodge the entire combo, you know the entire combo, then you get a hit. Okay, that's the rhythm. I don't mind if it's a slow rhythm where it's one hit back away, one hit back away. If I manage to dodge that entire combo, I should be rewarded with free damage.
Sure.
But instead, Margit goes, "Oh, you're next to me." Immediately string into another combo. While I'm locked into an animation of an R1, not an R2,
Yep.
not a big jump attack where I'm locked in animation, into the animation of a longsword quick R1, I cannot react to the next hit.
I found a great post that summarized, like, I think both of our feelings on the combat. Enemies and bosses are playing Bloodborne, you're playing DS2. Like, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think it's a bit. I think the combat it looks similar to PS3, but it feels slower, which is fine if the whole game is slower. It's not. The whole game is faster.
But you were playing by yourself. You didn't use any summons or...
No, so none of that, like, aggro changing comes into play.
But you are basically playing Elden Ring as a DS3, or maybe another Souls game, without trying out what the game has to offer you.
No, I tried the summons and killed him. But I'm a challenge runner.
Yeah, I know you're
I'm a challenge runner, and the game should feel clean enough that if I get good enough, the boss should not hit me.
Yeah. Well, that's up for debate.
No, if I get good enough, I'm not talking about out the gate. I'm talking about if I learn this boss. If I spend hours learning this boss, learning it, studying it, I should be able to get good enough to 100% this boss.
Yeah, but
I agree.
That is so based on time. I mean, there's nothing you can say right now to me that would convince me that saying for a challenge run you should be able to do it if you have enough practice. But when is that practice over? You cannot tell me when you feel like, okay, now I know this boss. Because if you get defeated by that said boss, you haven't learned enough.
When I can dodge every single combo unless he strings another 4 on me.
But it does.
When you feel you're learning, okay, that at least for me is the foggy barometer I use to determine whether or not I'm comfortable with I've practiced something in a game or in real life enough. When I'm able to say with reasonable accuracy, when I see this happen, I react like this and I achieve this outcome. If you want to see this in action, at least from me, because I think it's probably the best work I did out of my admittedly fairly mediocre Soulsborne playthroughs, go watch my Sekiro or DS1 playthroughs. I feel like I had enough experience to learn those, and you can tell because I'm way more confident there than, say, I was fighting the Nameless King in DS3 or any of the stuff in Bloodborne. I think confidence and a certain, certainty of knowledge are what drive the kind of familiarity Eclipse is talking about. And I agree that it can be very frustrating in a title like this, where apropos of nothing, despite the player's skill and the fact that they are reacting properly to the audiovisual cues they're being given, the game can at random determine to punish them for effectively taking what is coded, what is intended as the correct action. But that's just me. That's the source of my dissatisfaction.
Well,
you're right.
My dissatisfaction comes from the overkill dragon type of bosses that I had to face. For instance, if a boss flies over your head, spewing the magic at you that is almost impossible to dodge, or if you try to get a few hits in, but the boss is so big that you can only see his anus and nothing else on the screen. That's the bullshit stuff. That's, for me, was the stuff that just frustrated me to no end. Because we did have the discussion, me and Brady had the discussion before about 2 bosses that we are both unhappy about. He was unhappy about a boss that I felt was okay, was fine. It was an interesting fight, and I liked it. And he was really enjoying a fight with the boss that I am now really fucking upset about, because it just keeps killing me by fucking magic constantly. It's beautiful. It looks beautiful. But you did not enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it either. I'm still not enjoying it. It's those things that just fucking break me, because especially with that fight, because it's 2 phases. The first phase starts, and with my build, with my strength build, it's pretty complementary, and I can fight him and I get him to the second phase without that much of an effort. But that dragon, Jesus Christ, I wish I was a mage at that point, because he's so far away or up in the sky, and when you get close, yes, I can finally hit him. Oh no, he flies away again. Oh no. And then I have to chase him, and then he starts throwing all this magic at me while I'm trying to catch up to where he is. That's the bullshit stuff. That's the thing about pick a lane. If you're going to build a boss that complements or complements a particular style, that you can go say, okay, this boss complements my style. I don't have to change anything. Or if you like potato and say, well, this does not change. This does not work with my build. I'm gonna respec and I'm gonna try something else and see if that works for me. Because now I have to get like in line and say, well, I better go in level 200, so I get my caster build and my strength build in one character, so I can get this boss done. So that's the most frustrating thing about boss design and boss combat for me in this iteration of Souls.
Now I think that's very valid and actually super insightful, Exit, because you also touched on probably the best summary of mine and Eclipse's complaints I've heard, but about in a different mechanical sense.
I think it's because we played different characters. We both played different characters.
But it feels like certain aspects of this game's mechanics, and I would say combat, but especially boss design, does it not, Eclipse, are actually actively at odds with each other. Like,
yeah,
I would say so.
They inherited just enough germ from the Souls trilogy to present like a mechanical base, but then they tried to design the encounters specifically to combat Souls playstyles while not offering much aside from summons and the like to manage them.
But I don't feel like they went out of their way to make sure that Souls players are gonna be unfamiliar with it. I just feel like they tried to change stuff. Same as they did like changing Bloodborne to make the like more aggressive playstyle pay off, or you hitting the boss or you hitting the enemies heals you. I don't feel like that's just them going, oh yeah, fuck those guys, fuck that specific part of our community. I feel it's just like you don't want to keep making the same game over and over again, so you find little things, changes, balances. It might not be the best choice, it might not be even close to it, but if you just keep making the same game, what are you gonna get? Call of Duty 25.
I agree, but if it's not the best choice, I guess this kind of segue. Oh no, Eclipse, did you have something to say?
I don't. I just think like I'm really trying to think how to like phrase this point, because Exit said, "When do you feel like you've learned the boss?"
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, when do you feel like you've not learned the boss? When do you feel like you've not learned the boss, but you've just tanked through it? I like to learn the boss inside out, but this game, more than like any of the end game DS3 stuff or DS2 or DS1 stuff, like ONS it will show level 1 for whatever goddamn reason I was thinking about.
But the kind of just to help you out here a little bit is that the way that you play from a different perspective than I.
So we get different perspective, but why is this game allowed to invalidate my perspective?
Because it's only out for a little bit more than a week, and I've played this game with all the tools that were given to me, and that helps me be able to make mistakes. So I can miss a roll, or I can fuck up a combo, because I have so many extra tools on me to help me get to where I am, that I can make those mistakes and still progress. If I would like switch stuff around, say for instance, I'm gonna do a playthrough and I'm not gonna use any summons, then the whole game changes for me. It gets harder, but it will take me longer to figure out how I'm going to deal with a certain encounter before I can actually finish that encounter. So basically, what I was trying to tell you, you've learned the boss when you actually killed the boss. If you want to play it in a certain way, you would say, I'm gonna use no summons, I'm not gonna use any weapon arts, I'm going to do it like this, and this is how I want to learn the boss. be prepared. It will take you longer than other people who will give all the tools that they have, and that is fair in my opinion. You just gimping yourself, so because you want to get that satisfaction of I want to be able to do this, because you have that in your head that you want to do this, but you're also at the same time thinking, well, I've been managing that in DS3 easy, so I should be able to get that done
Well, it
here
wasn't
as
easy in
well.
DS3.
Well, at some point no, probably not, but yeah, at some point in the game that you've played for years, because how long has it been out now? 10 years maybe. Uh,
So,
no, let me finish. Let me finish real quick. Is that uh, I think the given the way that you want to play this, I think you need to be able to take a step back and say, okay, I'm going to have to learn a lot more than Exit does, because Exit is playing different, or Potato in that, and for that matter. That's what I wanted to tell you.
So, really quickly, I would direct any and all of our viewers and panelists to Eclipse's stream VODs, which include, like, over the past couple of months, well, I want to say dozens of hours dedicated to learning Sister Freda perfectly inside and
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
And similar
Ridiculous.
processes for every other boss. It took a long time, it took a lot of investment that you managed with a really positive attitude, hence why I'm a big fan.
Me too.
But at the same time, from my perspective, I appreciate what you're saying, Exit, and I think the germ you really hit on here that broadly divides our experiences into two camps is not what kind of game we're expecting, but rather it's something I've talked about on the podcast before. It boils down to what kind of experience we are and are not frustrated by, and what aspects do and do not constitute pain points for each of us. It sounds like, to me, and I would imagine, because opinion on Elden Ring's combat in particular is actually fairly divisive, even though the rest of the game has been received very, very well. A lot of people out there in our audience may recognize themselves in one of these two camps. Like, what's driving a lot of the frustration for me personally, and it sounds like based on our conversations, like what's driving a lot of for you too, Eclipse, is I am totally fine with taking hits. I'm fine with taking deaths. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't ruin my day. Nowhere near. But context matters, and I only want to take hits or deaths that I can recognize, even with hindsight, with study, with observation. There's why I took a hit. That was my mistake. Even if it doesn't kill me, if it shaves off 1/10 of my health at most, and I take hits that I am unable in retrospect to analyze as such, it's going to frustrate me. It's going to create what in game design is referred to as a pain point, an aspect of the experience which is genuinely unpleasant as opposed to challenging or maybe a little rage-inducing, and could potentially discourage players from continuing. It's something that, like, in QA and focus testing, devs pay a lot of attention to. But like where you, Exit, and Potato are coming from seems to be a place more, and I'm not saying this is right, wrong, or indifferent, just trying to understand, more tolerant of that. Like, okay, there's gonna be bullshit hits, there's going to be bullshit deaths, there's going to be some genuinely poor design, but as long as you can get to the end and you can enjoy the whole experience, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Basically, there's a couple of exceptions. So, for instance, the third demigod boss in the Eastern Province. I'm not gonna name names, but okay.
One of my favorites.
Wait. Let me set you this another way. For instance, when I played, and you can attest to this because you've done this as well, Eclipse. If you try different builds in DS3, there is this boss in DS3. What's it called again? The Dragon Slayer armor.
Yeah.
The Dragon Slayer armor is big dude, big shield, big axe. Or spear? Was it a spear? Big. So if
Axe.
you go, yeah.
Axe
So if you
shield.
go to as a melee person and you have to face up to something with a big ass shield and a big ass axe, you're gonna be having a very painful time, and it's gonna be rough. So fast forward, I play a caster build. I go to the exact same boss and I down it in 20 seconds flat. And just because I'm standing at range, I'm throwing spells at him that he cannot dodge or shield against. I'm just, hey, this is easy, woo! this game has the exact same thing. So you have bosses that are for particular builds is going to be easy, and for other builds is going to be harder. What the game doesn't do, however, is being able to actually do it, because the Dragon Slayer armor, how hard that fight can be as a melee person, you will be able to get it. It is doable, really doable. But in this game, for instance, with that same fight that I was just mentioning, that is not doable for a melee character for my class, and especially not at that level when I started out with. I had to gain to 10 to 15 levels extra just to be able to get through that bitch. And and I had summons, but I had otherwise I wouldn't be able to do it. I had people who were caster summons being just shooting shit at him, and I was like seeing his health bar going like down like 1/5 at the time whether I was hitting it, and it would do like maybe like a really tiny bit of damage. And that is my point. I should be able to do more to that boss than just that little amount of damage.
But the game, that's why the game gives you a choice of like so many summons,
Yeah.
like not even player summons. Also,
No, but that's for that encounter.
something-
You have the other summons, so you cannot use your own summon anymore.
oh,
Remember?
you mean the one on the horse, huh?
Yeah, the one on the horse, and then you have to like grab a little army and blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
So-
okay, but still, like, yeah, the game also is sort of like, you don't have to do this right now. Come back later.
True.
That's why it's open world. You don't. It's not linear. You don't have to kill him right now.
Yeah, that took me a while to realize, because I was not used to that. It is an end boss, so I thought, yeah, this is an end boss for a region. I need to do this, or otherwise I cannot progress.
Yeah,
And
it
that-
happened to me as well. I went into a secret dungeon at the very beginning, and I was like, okay, this boss is a pain in the ass, but I'll somehow I have to kill it. So I racked up like 30
Okay.
deaths just in the first 45 minutes of the game.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yep. But in the end, I finished it off by using people summons, something that I was really against, because I really wanted to do it all by myself with all the tools that are available to me, but not the player summons. But I ended up having to do player summons because I was stuck on that for almost 2 days, just doing the same fight over and over and over again, and it was really wearing me down, and I really wanted to see that next content, like Brady said. I wanted to keep going. I wanted to see what the game has in store for me. So I went back and I did that people summons. But yeah, my next build is going to be more caster related, so I can fuck him up the ass pretty quickly. But I know that there are going to be encounters that I had no problem with as a strength build that are going to be really hard with a caster build, for instance. But I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to seeing what I can think of to be able to help me get that done as well. So yeah.
All right. Eclipse, any thoughts before we move on to our next point?
I get what you guys are saying, but I think there's something a bit different from this boss is maybe too mobile for a strength build, or this boss is too, compared to this boss finished a combo, and as I was doing an R1, it smacked me in the face.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, if the boss finishes a combo, it should not be then to decide you're doing an R1 to punish that combo that you dodged perfectly, smack.
So what does that tell you?
Nothing, at least in my experience, because there's no way to, if you're not running like a caster build, for instance, reliably deal damage without taking damage in return if an enemy has AI path.
What if you use a summon?
For instance, no, I was actually going to say, you remember that there was, I think it was in DS1, there's a boss that does a particular combo, but it could be easy, that it looked like the same combo, but it could be 2 strikes, 3 strikes, 5 strikes, and 7 strikes, depending on what he was feeling at
You
that
thinking
moment.
of Manus?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but
Is it something like that though? I mean, is it something that you have to be aware of, that if you see a combo end, that you have to feel, wait, is it though? Is it ending? Is it something else?
But DS1 was also slow enough that if you took that second to wait, you could still hit him.
Yes.
Yeah, or you could still punish. The Elden Ring is not that case. If you wait, the boss is active again and trying to kill you.
Yeah.
If you wait that split second, the boss is active again and trying to kill you. The boss
And-
just at random removes opportunities to hit him.
And I find myself occupying something of a middle ground regarding summons because I found collecting them as like items and rewards out in the world to be a lot of fun and very, very useful for discerning the lore. And I thought it was super cute that you could call in like characters from around the world and develop them and like pick your favorites and all of that.
Yeah, I was talking
But I
about people
also
summons. People summons.
do
So
not feel as though they should be or should feel mandatory in order to manage encounters against a single opponent.
They
That
aren't.
is not traditionally the way any game, not in this franchise, in this genre operates.
Yeah, but they
And
aren't. That's my point. They aren't. They aren't. They aren't viable. They aren't necessary to finish a particular instance. They're only necessary to finish a particular instance easily. So if you remove that and you say, okay, I don't want to use those anymore, you're increasing the difficulty of the game for yourself via not using a particular tool the game has given you, meaning that
Sure.
you're going to have a harder time. So you will take longer to learn the boss or learn the encounter and be able to overcome.
But
Those are
learning-
boundaries that you set yourself.
No,
Not
but
the
Brady,
game.
listen to this. It's like I absolutely have the utmost respect for challenge runners because, you know, it's like it's an art, like getting to the
You're
point
making
where
me
you can
feel
actually
like I
challenge.
don't appreciate.
No. I say this because of what I'm gonna say next.
Okay.
And the thing is, like, you insisting to want to not use a mechanic you were given and the game was designed around is like saying, okay, I'm going to play tennis, but I'm going to use a ping pong racket. And then going, well, I feel that this game is a bit unfair to me because I'm using a ping pong racket. Yes, because it's not intended to be used.
But it feels as if, okay, maybe it's not, but it feels as if I'm using a ping pong racket and my opponent also has 3 of them and a rocket launcher.
yeah, and I would point out to our panelists and audience, because I think it's something that's gotten lost in the discourse here. All 3 of the mainline Souls titles also featured bountiful, really plentiful in the case of DS2, NPC summons. And with the exception of specific areas clearly coded, like in-game, they convey to you that they are meant for multiplayer in Dark Souls 2, never once did any of those bosses feel as though they were inherently designed with a summon in mind and that their moveset would be not unmanageable, but undodgeable or unblockable otherwise. Not once.
Yeah, but I don't have proof that it is with this game. I don't have proof that saying, okay, in Elden Ring that is a problem, because the game is only a little bit more than a week old.
Certainly.
The only thing I can concede to is the fact that it does feel like the game doesn't maybe communicate well enough that you have all these resources at your disposal that you should be using. It just like gives them to you, and even the summoning bell, which is one of the arguably more like important mechanics in the game.
Mhm.
Like if you're not going for to make your life more difficult, you're going to want to use those summons. It's missable. You can literally miss getting it. Like that's my problem with it.
You can actually miss the level up maiden, I think.
Yeah, actually, yeah. You have to use.
Yeah, you
one of
can
the
miss the
two-
level up maiden in this
You
game.
have to use one of the 2 graces in the beginning.
Yeah, this game has a lot of shit that's actually missable that really shouldn't be.
But let's be honest, if you do miss her, you're probably gonna end up coming back.
Probably.
Because you ain't gonna go far.
But the buff bottle is, I think, the most important thing that you can miss, or the easiest.
Yeah,
The flask. Yeah.
physics,
the easiest one. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, the flask of bloody physics.
Just the fact that if you want to find out about it, you gotta buy it, buy the info.
Yeah. And the way it works and where you get your upgrade materials from, nobody tells you.
Now, before we carry on, because there's one more major topic I want to touch on before we let you wonderful people go for the day. I apologize for taking so long to record this. But, well, big game, 90-hour game. We have a lot to say. Just to further drive home my point, and here comes spoilers for a specific encounter. Eclipse, I've not told you about the super boss, have I, or how they work?
No, you've just said you were frustrated.
I find it the cheapest design this developer's ever gone for, and now I'm going to share the mechanics, not the narrative, with all of you lovely people. Follow me now. Previous super bosses in the Soul series, by the way, included the likes of Dark Lurker, the Nameless King and King of the Storm, technically Slave Nightingale from DS3, also equally technically like Dark Sun Gwendolyn from Dark Souls 1.
I would say Midir was the super boss and Gale was the actual boss.
True. Okay, I'll give you that one. Yeah, Midir. All of which were manageable. Hell, even the Demon of Hatred from Sekiro, which was that game's worst fight, super boss that's manageable and will push you to your limit. Here's how Elden Rings works. It's that one sword fight that From Software designs over and over and over again. You know, the one against a really cool-looking, extremely swift opponent who fights with a long, curved blade and no shield, because shields are for cowards, of course. We've seen this before. It's Gurman. It's with a different shaped sword. It's Artorias. It's roughly half the DS3 boss roster, all told. It's that fight, you know.
Alone, sword, alone.
Yes, exactly. And it is a fairly frail boss, to be fair, that you can stagger. If you hit them, they will stagger, which is very nice. And they seemingly don't have a ton of health. A fair amount by endgame, but not a ton. Here's the thing. They track, as you would expect. They use a weapon art that allows them to teleport to the player's position 4 times in sequence and perform a series of radial AoEs every single time. So it'll hit maybe 3-4 times. There is technically dodge timing for it, but it's inconsistent. You cannot reliably dodge it the same way without an incredible measure of either luck or iframes. It has a second phase, a second full health bar, your favorite thing, Eclipse, where every single one of its attacks deals toxic damage. And, you ready for the kicker? My favorite part? Lightning fast swordsman, and every time one of their attacks connects, not deals damage, connects if the damage is absorbed, they gain back a significant chunk of health.
Yep.
This is what is considered a good end-game challenge in Elden Ring, and FromSoft has never gone anywhere near that territory before. It's frankly absurd, and it didn't give me all that much trouble. I got it in about an hour, probably. But the cheapness of the mechanical design frustrated me to no end. Like, is there not a more engaging way you guys could have built this thing? And the answer is apparently no. That's what they thought people wanted. And hell, what do I know? Maybe some people do.
Well, I mean, the game's only been out, like Exit said, for a week. They still have the time to change it. The fact of the matter right now is they're doing their best to patch up the problems that the people playing on the PC have with performance.
The PC was not fun to
No,
begin with.
Because
Oh my God.
let's just be honest. Some bosses being slightly or severely overtuned is much less of an issue than people not being able to play the game.
Yeah, like, I had the PC issues, and I'll be completely honest here, they might have, my first fights with Margit, where, when I beat him actually, I beat him using summons and stuff, was during the time when I was having PC issues. So maybe that's cured the entire game for me. I don't think it has, but maybe it has.
For me, it has. I mean, I had a lot of problems with the stuttering and the choking, and that killed me. Basically killed me constantly. So if I was in a boss fight,
so maybe that's pissed me off.
Your timing goes off. You're in that rhythm. You're in that dance with that fight at that moment, and then the stutter happens, and I stand somewhere else because the game continues, but my screen doesn't, and it just like bloop. And
did you ever get Exit where the game would slow down then speed up?
Yeah.
That looked really ridiculous when a boss suddenly sped up into your face.
Yeah,
That was PC though. That wasn't any tracking of
No,
game.
you guys on PS5s never had that issue, but we on PC have, and still have, by the way. I just you remember that four candles that you had to lit in that Gaul for particular
in
entrance?
the liturgical town. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was basically unplayable for me. I had to look down constantly because if I didn't and I look up, my whole screen in the back, the back plane would go black because the game could not render all that detail with the start. I had to actually choke everything down just be able to finish that part.
I've had the floor just not spawn in.
Yeah, stuff like that happens on PC constantly. That's why I don't get, and that's I think we have to move a little bit towards the ending anyway. So that's why I don't get they got a 10 out of 10 from most people. This is something. This is game breaking for me, and I would never have.
Speaking of grading, I don't think this game's a 10 out of 10.
No, it isn't.
Nowhere near.
I don't
It
even
could
think
be.
it's
It could have been, but not at time of release, and definitely at time at review. I don't believe it should be 10 out of 10.
I don't think it's the best. I don't know. I want to play more of the game before I give like a definitive point. And yeah, and yes, I am giving this like a game a fair shot, guys. I'm doing a playthrough where I'm not challenge running it. Okay.
Definitely, yeah.
I'm doing a playthrough where I'm not challenge running it. Like concurrently with my challenge run playthrough. And I think the fact that like vital items are like missable too easily is really kind of killing the flow of the game for me. So I definitely think they had to like they kind of forgot that they weren't doing a linear game in some aspects.
Mm-hmm. What kind of grade would you have given the game if you have to
I
give
would
it a grade right now?
say if I were to give Dark Souls 3 a 9, I would probably give this a 7.
A 7, okay.
That's fair.
What about you, Brady?
So, I'm sorry, I know we're going a bit long, but by way of my concluding thoughts, I want to talk, before I give my grade, which I think you guys can probably guesstimate, about something I've seen in the discourse surrounding this and other Dark Souls games. We talked earlier off stream, right, about certain elements of the design, specifically in regards to our concerns about, like, balancing and tracking and things like that. And in the Super Boss in particular, and I think all four of us agreed, right, if a company apart from Software that didn't have that name tried to put something like that in their game, it wouldn't be divisive. It'd be almost universally panned by a player base. Like this company, like, say, Nintendo, like CDPR, has, through good works, managed to earn itself a kind of critical insulation, right? They can get away with some things others probably wouldn't be able to.
It's kind of like Bethesda until they released Skyrim for the 7th time.
Yes,
the 8th time
exactly.
To off.
And something I've seen, specifically regarding Elden Ring, people talking about it, sharing their thoughts online, is a sentiment I can summarize as, it sucks, so it doesn't. People will say, this boss is bullshit. They'll say the attacks track far too strongly. They'll say such and such spell deals way too much damage in players' or boss's hands. I don't like this. I can't understand that. I'm having a horrible time with this. But the game is fantastic, and I don't want to hear anybody else say otherwise. And to me, that strikes a very interesting dissonance between consumable product and ephemeral experience, right? I think something that has cultivated such a strong, and at times maybe too strong, fan base for Souls in particular is the fact that since the series dawned on us in the age of the internet and right around the major boom in online gaming streaming, there really was this sense of community and camaraderie and shared experience that developed around the franchise and subsequently its creators. But a lot of people seem to unknowingly be fusing their absolute admiration for the experience of going through something like this, experiencing and marveling at something like this with other people, which is absolutely immaculate, and then the quality of the product itself, Because it's one thing to say, as I have with many games, Obsidian's infamous Alpha Protocol, the espionage action RPG, or NSR by Metronomic Games. I really like this game. I love this game. I understand there are flaws or problems with it, and it'd be better without them, and they definitely should correct them if they make a sequel or reiterate or something like that. It'd be a better product. But I enjoy it all the same, and can understand if those flaws cause problems for others. And what I've seen a lot of people say, in essence, about Elden Ring, which is, this game is brilliant. I don't like a lot of it, but it is. And even though there are flaws present, nobody else is allowed to say, feel, or like signal boost the fact that these flaws are present, because I don't want that criticism of the product to taint or cross over into my personal experience, like my appreciation of this journey I've gotten to go on. I want that to be sacrosanct. And I've never understood that mentality. Never understood it. It's been a little distressing to see so many people online take that kind of stance, that kind of tack, because like Eclipse said, it does kind of invalidate, more than playstyles, it invalidates opinions and perspectives that ultimately can be used by people who love and care about the game, just like I do, just like Eclipse does, just like all of us do, to make a better product that more people will be able to enjoy to a deeper extent. So I don't think saying it's got all these flaws, but they don't matter is the proper response. I think saying it's got flaws, they didn't bother me, but they really should fix them, is probably the kind of tack we should take if we want to issue glowing reviews. But that's my soapbox. For me, I love everything but the combat rebalancing and veteran proofing, so I'm going to give it an 8.25. Very good and impressive for FromSoft's first serious attempt at open world gameplay, but there's clearly a lot of room to grow, develop, and polish things other than difficulty or that one sword fight they love so much, and I sincerely hope that they do, because they have something very special in the works here.
Yeah, my grade would be around a 9. Thinking of detracting the fact that the PC port or the PC version is not running as smooth as it should have, and I don't get the idea that they're working on it fast enough. I mean, if I would install Linux right now and I would run Steam on Linux, I would have a better experience playing the Elden Ring, because they have their drivers in order to compensate for the fact that the Windows version doesn't work properly. That the Windows version is. So that's detracting for the game. But the points, the negative points of the game itself that I have are so small compared of what the game has to offer me, is that I don't feel like I should. I do complain a lot about some stuff, and I will throw my controller down at some point, saying, "Well, this is fucking bullshit." But it is so small compared to what this game has to offer you, what this game entails, that I don't really want to give it that big of a deduction on that. That's why I think a 9 would be more appropriate.
Right.
Mostly because of the fact that the PC port is so bad. So I can't talk about the PS5 experience that you have, but from my experience, from my PC experience, I would definitely not rate it 10 out of 10, just based on that. Plus the minor things that I have problems with, which I probably will overcome at some point. But those are small gripes compared of the scale of this game. That's why a 9. What about you, Tater?
Oh yeah. For me, also an easy 9. Like no doubt about it. Not giving it a 10 because like I said before, the game does have its problems. I don't agree with Brady that it's veteran proofing, just because it's unfamiliar to people who like it's not what people who play DS3 are used to. Because then I could say Sekiro was veteran proofing as well. But easy 9.
Yep, fair enough.
Right on. Any
Clips?
final thoughts, anyone?
Oh yeah, Clips
Seven
already
killers
said 7.
really
Yeah,
good.
7.
Hmm?
No, I thought the Clips didn't fill in. Didn't supply a grade, but he did.
All right then. In that case, I hope this discourse has been illuminating and entertaining to some of you fine folks out there. And I do hope that you will tender your own thoughts in the comment section below, especially if you have time with the game and you're kind of going on this journey yourself. Let us know how it's been for you. I'm very, very interested to see what people have experienced. I want to thank you all so much for sitting through an extra long episode of the Overanalysts Fit for an Extra Long Game. A major thanks, as always, to Comrade Potato for offering his thoughts, and special thanks to Eclipsesight and ExitDust for joining us and offering their thoughts on this journey. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to do this for us.
No worries, man. We're glad to be here.
Yep.
Is there any, social media, any Twitch platforms, anything you guys want to highlight here or in our description?
Well, I do have a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/ExitDust. And
You're gonna start streaming again?
I don't stream that much anymore, maybe once a month, but I do stream sometimes. So yeah, maybe come by, say hi. It's fine.
And all I'll say is, if you hated what I said about Elden Ring and you want to see a game kick my ass, come watch me do a challenge run.
Fun rhymes. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring our proceedings to a close. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Overanalysts podcast. My name is Brady, wishing you all a wonderful rest of your day. And should you be venturing into the lands between, well, pack some ash, like a lot of ash. You're gonna need it, and drink up.
And some salt, maybe some salt.